Hello. Hi, Tara. That looks like that's all doing what it's supposed to do. Right. Some people are here. Lovely. Hello! Hello, everyone! My name is RJ Davnall. You can call me Becky, or E. You can call me anything you want, but Becky for preference. Welcome to my book launch! I'm very nervous. I haven't done this before. And hopefully we're going to have a fun time. The book is called Heaven Can Wait. It's out now! If you look below the stream, you should see the book cover. It's a link to a site that has all the buy links and stuff. Currently available, all major ebook formats and some plain text formats on Smashwords. It's coming to the Kindle store on Sunday. Physical copies are on their way very soon. I have one right next to me. There's just a slight hitch with the printed distributor that we hope to get sorted out very quickly. That will be available Blackwell's Book Depository, Amazon, Blurb.com. If you take the ISBN to your local bookstore, your favourite local independent bookstore, they'll be able to order you a copy. I will be shouting from the rooftops when it's actually available in print. While you're down there, please look slightly to the right of that, where there are the chat rules. It's all fairly intuitive stuff. Please feel free to chat, to say hi, etc. But obviously be nice about it. Chat is moderated. Thank you, Tara. Her word is law. I trust her implicitly, so be good. Quick outline of what we're going to do. So in a minute, I'll be welcoming my lovely editor, Sara Uckelman. We're going to talk a bit about Ellipsis Imprint, the publisher. And about the book as well, a little bit, I hope. After that, my dear friend Rachel Handley will be joining us to read a short story from her forthcoming collection with Ellipsis. And then I will actually read some of my book. How's that? And then towards the end of the evening, we'll do some Q&A type stuff. You can ask questions in chat. If they disappear because too many people are putting stuff in chat, then down below the video also is a Q&A link for Menti. And if you go there, you can either click the link and it goes right to the form, or you can go to menti.com and put in the numerical code. What that will do is, you can type in your question. They're coming up on a separate screen. Your personal information, your questions, your identity will not be displayed or harvested in any way. But towards the end, I'll go through any questions that there are, and hopefully we'll have some interesting things to say about them and so on. Was there anything else I wanted to say at this stage? 1 second. I don't think so. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is invite Sarah in. So the first thing I need to do is that, and then I need to go there. Hello, Sarah, can you hear me?
Hello, I can hear you.
Fantastic.
You hear me?
I can hear you. How am I talking if I ghost? It's a ghost story. He does a lot of talking in the story. It's fine. I do need to change a setting because something has gone wrong because OBS is weird. I bet that needs to be 375. Does that look right? No. I still can't see the thing. This shows you how the sausage is made. I'm going to have to change that back in a minute. Okay. Thank you for saying I look cute. I thought I'd dress up as a ghost because I'm selling my ghost story. I don't normally look like this. I will look like other things in future, but ghost for today. So, with that done, Sarah, thank you for coming. Please introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm Sara Uckelman. I'm a friend of Becky's, and I'm also the founder and editor-in-chief of Ellipsis Imprints. And we are extremely excited to be publishing Becky's book, to be letting it loose on the world, and to be here tonight.
Yeah, I should say I've done something very, very dangerous with this stream, which is that I'm an academic philosopher, Sarah is an academic philosopher, Rachel is also an academic philosopher. I'm going to try very hard to keep the philosophy to a minimum because academic philosophy is terrible, but some will probably...
But science fiction is good.
I once did a philosophy of science fiction module. We'll find some useful crossover.
Absolutely.
So to begin with, could you tell us the story of why you set up Ellipsis, please?
So, I had said for years, not going to get into publishing, getting into publishing, not a good idea. And then, just over a year ago, so it was actually pre-pandemic, my 9-year-old daughter came to me, and she knows I write stories, and she sometimes likes to write stories herself. And she asked me, "Mommy, could we write a story together?" How do you say no? You don't. You start writing a story, and we drafted it over a couple of weeks, and then I got my mom involved because she is an excellent artist, and so I commissioned her to draw some pictures, and then my daughter was like, maybe someday it will get printed like a real book. Again, what do you do when your daughter says this? Well, the only sensible, rational thing to do is to start a publishing house. And so that is how we came up here. I will see if you can see this. This is an awfully big adventure by 3-generation affair, and that is Ellipsis Imprint's first publication. And it's cheaper to buy 10 ISBNs than just one by a big margin, and so that left me with 9 ISBNs left to assign in other ways. And so yes, one thing led to another, and then the pandemic struck, and what is the appropriate thing to do when you're stuck at home but start the venture that you always said that you would never do? And thus we have Ellipsis Imprints.
Yes, it's past Gwen's bedtime, right? So she
yes.
can't kind of say hi for us and thank her for being the spark for all this. I'm very grateful.
Yes. Yes.
So what else have you got? Obviously Heaven Can Wait is one of the 9 ISBNs. What else have you got coming up?
Yes. So we actually published a second book last year and got that here. So Striking Bodies, Striking Minds is an anthology that came out of the higher education in the United Kingdom over the last couple of years has gone through a lot of labor and industrial disputes across the entire sector. And so that anthology was bringing together a bunch of the kind of ephemeral bits that we were seeing on Facebook, on Twitter, stories being exchanged amongst people or on the picket lines, and these sorts of things shouldn't be lost. So it's poems, cartoons, drawings, songs, short stories, all sorts of things. And this is it's a charity anthology in the sense that any of the profits from selling copies of this I'm donating back to the University and Colleges Union, which were kind of the major union involved in all of this. And then, with 2 books under my belt, then Becky Becky's book was the next one. She's like, I actually have a couple of manuscripts. Would you like to read them? And I read it, and it's like, this is great. I would like to publish this. I would like to do more. And we have a whole bunch of things actually scheduled to come out this year. A collection of poetry, so the debut poetry of Sophie Grace Chappell will be coming out, I think, probably within another 2 months or so.
Mm-hmm.
Rachel, who will be joining us later, has a collection of philosophical science fiction stories, and that is kind of more distant in the future. That will be coming out next year sometime. And in between, we also have 2 kind of popular nonfiction books on relating to interpretation of the Talmud and Jewish life, specifically with respect to the Sabbath. So it's an eclectic collection.
Very eclectic, yeah. It's an extraordinary collection of projects. Do you have, I mean, maybe this is the wrong question, do you have like a kind of vision or an ethos for Ellipsis?
Weirdly, given that collection, the answer is yes. We are interested in speculative, so on the fiction side, speculative fiction, very broadly construed, so mostly science fiction and fantasy, but we read quite broadly. And having read quite a lot, received manuscript pitches and things, it's become quite clear what our ethos is. And our ethos is stories that don't involve loads of gratuitous violence, stories that center voices that don't normally get centered. So we are interested in queer authors, we are interested in Black authors, we are interested in all of the people who are not normally kind of picked up in kind of traditional publishing, because they have the most interesting stories to tell. This is something that I have found, just kind of empirical evidence from reading that I have done. But I'm also interested in kind of books that take academic sorts of topics and make them accessible to non-academics. And so that's where like the 2 books by Charles Vernoff that we will be publishing come in. They take kind of the life work of an academic in Jewish studies and making it available to the non-academic audience. Same with Rachel's books. You've got stories that are filled with kind of academic in-jokes, in a sense, dealing with kind of thought experiments in traditional philosophy, but turning them into stories. And also it's just things that you come away from reading feeling better about yourself, about the world, about the future. So that sort of thing.
Lovely. So that's Ellipsis. Tell me about my book. Tell me how talented and clever and beautiful you think I am.
Absolutely. So it's always a bit tricky when a friend says, "Do you want to read my book?" Or when you say to a friend, "I want to read your book," because then you always have
I should also note that when I when I pitched you not 1 book or 2 books, but 7 books total.
Yes.
You had 9 ISBNs.
Yep, so I could have given them all to you. So,
as Tara has said in chat, actually, for those of you watching the stream. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, anyway, I started reading it, and it was one of these things. It's like, okay, yeah, this is pretty good. Becky is a competent writer. She knows, grammar and stuff, and can kind of put together some sentences, and nothing is very clunky. And then you just kind of slowly got kind of sucked into it more and more. And I found myself, normally I don't read on my computer before bed, I read print books, but I found myself, it's like, oh, but I'll just read a couple more chapters. And as soon as you hit that point, that's when you know that, yeah, you've got a good story here. It's fun. There's this sense of never quite knowing what's going on, and this is both as kind of the experience as the reader, but also the experience that Tom, the main character, is having, because he doesn't really know quite what's going on. Who are the men who aren't there? What is this non-agency? Why has he been kind of selected out of all of the various people? And what is he going to do about it? And there's just, even though it's a fairly kind of slim little volume, there's so much going on. there's complicated world building. There's a lot of interesting kind of like religious backstory almost, and there's also a love interest. So I hope I'm not giving away too many spoilers. I'm trying to kind of.
Well, the love interest does make it into the free sample if you go to Smashwords.
Okay,
She
good.
just appears
Yeah, I'm
like
not saving
the last sort of
not
page of the
spoiling
sample,
anything.
so that's fine. Just for the people commenting in chat about the she knows grammar point, I should stress, by the way, that Sarah is a professor of medieval logic, so knowing grammar is high praise. It's not just like being able to form functional sentences. I probably don't know grammar by the standards of a professor of medieval logic, but...
On the other hand, when it came time to like giving you editorial comments, I think there was maybe like half a dozen places where I said, "Are you sure you want that comma there?" And that was about it. So in terms of like being able to kind of put together the whole package, something that's well written, that's engaging, that's interesting, that keeps me wanting to read more. It was, I think it was only like a couple of days after you sent the file that I wrote back. It's like, "Oh yes, please, please can I publish this?" And so it's been quite a journey and an experience for both of us. I think I have to say publicly thank you to Becky for being my guinea pig, because my daughter will be happy with whatever I turn out, but Becky is like a genuine real author, and I need to do well by her.
Well, I am now. I have you to thank.
You have a published book. With an actual press.
I do. It's there. I've got one here in my hand. I can't show it because on stream but it's exactly the same one as the one Sarah's got.
Yes. Okay. I can show the copy that I've got.
Isn't it beautiful and shiny?
Yes. Reflecting my monitor.
This is a continual problem with showing things to stream. I've had this problem myself.
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean that's the story really. So can people pitch you, contact you about stuff?
Absolutely. In fact, if I am clever enough, I can put our website in the chat. And no, I can't, because I would need to make an account first. Maybe.
Can you put it in the Zoom chat and I'll post it across?
Yes.
You can also contact Ellipsis on Twitter by the @ that is on screen. I hope that's legible.
Yeah, but absolutely, we are very interested in receiving pitches. The instructions on the website say first chapter or 20 pages, whichever is larger. But in principle, we're quite flexible and willing to take things at any variety of stages. So. Yeah, spread the word. We are interested in reading what people have.
I was also instructed before we bid Sarah farewell to direct everybody to notice the fine collection of board games on the shelf behind her.
Yes, you can't quite see as much on the Twitch stream as you can on Zoom, but yeah, I brought the nice webcam so that everybody can see them.
And the glass of wine as well. Wine,
beer? The beer here.
Okay. I decided I'd better be sober for this, just in case, Well, thank you very much for joining us. It's been lovely to talk to you.
Thank you very much for having me, and congratulations on your book, because that's what we're here to celebrate.
I think some of them might be academic books, Sara. I'm not sure. Are the academic books all in your work office?
Not on these shelves. The academic books are all on the shelves downstairs.
Jolly good. Okay, let's see. Which is the button I need to press? Right, I will go back to that quickly to get things set up for Rachel. There we go. Rachel, are you there?
Hello.
Hello. Right, let's go to Rachel. And is Rachel audible? Say something.
Am I audible? Hello.
It looks like you should be audible.
Ooh, I'm delayed.
There's about a 15-second delay usually
Oh, it's
between.
creepy.
This is why you need to like have the sound muted from down there.
I need to stop looking at it.
Okay, you're
Okay.
a little bit quiet. Let me just turn that up. Keep me posted on volume levels, chat. So, Rachel Handley, long-time friend of mine, former colleague. This is another one where I have to be really careful because we used to have this problem where, like, I would pop my head around the door at the end of work on a Friday to just say goodbye to Rachel, and we'd still be talking like 2 hours later. So, I'll try to keep this part as brief as possible. Introduce yourself.
I am Rachel. I am a philosopher by day and a writer by night / whenever I'm procrastinating being a philosopher, or doing both, maybe, I suppose. I'm currently based in Dublin. Everything's locked down here, can't go outside, so I have no choice but to write, which is actually pretty good, especially because I owe Sarah words at the end of summer. And I think this is more than just like an intro of me, but like in terms of like the book, like the short story collection.
That was going to be the next question.
Okay, sorry, I'm like yeah.
It's all right. It's fine. It's fine. Tell us about your tell us
okay.
about your.
Yeah, it's a bit weird. Short story collections don't usually sell well, so they don't usually get published. So I'm extremely grateful for Sarah for picking this up, actually, because I don't think it would have been picked up otherwise. It all started maybe a year or two ago. I think it was like a few days before my mum went to hospital for like a cataracts operation, and I really got into it while I was waiting for her to like come out and be ready, because I was just bored in the cafe, and I started writing like these mini like tweet-sized stories, and then had like the hashtag boring sci-fi for them. And people liked them. They were really like dull. They were like, what happens in space when nothing exciting happens? And I really liked them. I found it very soothing. Other people did as well. And then after a while, I started to post them on a Ko-fi page and do slightly longer ones, because the Ko-fi page has blog posts. And then eventually I started writing just full-length stories. And at the same time, I was also finishing my PhD and writing a novel. So the story writing was procrastination from both of those things. And then eventually I built a website, and then I kind of thought, actually, this would be a really cool book. And I must have just mentioned it to Sarah, like offhand, like in the WhatsApp group, and she was like, yeah, anything you send, I will publish, in caps.
She gets very enthusiastic, bless her. And she's muted, so she can't fight back at the moment.
Well, and then I was kind of like, I can't resist that. I can't actually like say no to that. So then I like thought about it for a while, and I was actually like, yeah, actually this would be really cool, because I don't see, I like a mainstream publisher is not gonna go for it, I don't think, because it's a bit weird. But like the short stories are like the ones that people have read like just for free on my website. Some of them are going to be included and expanded, but lots of new stories are going to be in the collection as well, including the extended version of this. So I'm only going to read out the first part and not the rest of it, because I don't want to. I think it's one of the coolest stories and a little bit strange.
Should we go over to that then?
Okay, hold on.
If I do that, then, and I'll make sure that nobody can hear me. Thanks for coming by. So I will. Please go ahead.
Okay. So I'm like reading off Word now, so I can't see you. So if something goes wrong, just shout at me, basically. Okay. So this story is called We the Gold, which is already kind of an odd title, but it will make sense, I promise. So I knew what to expect. The cold chair sticking to my skin, the nausea, my heart trying to flop out of my chest. They prepared our group for the jump since we were young. My mum smiled the same smile, all teeth and pride, whenever anyone mentioned my rank and how it's still so young to be chosen. I would look at the floor, breathe, just breathe. 1, 2, 1, 2. Sen is ranked gold. This, that. My destiny was in my name, she'd say. I would nod and respond with a smile. She knew it was honourable to be chosen, but the rest, she had no clue. When she asked how my day went, I had to lie. I couldn't even let her know what I had for lunch, because our diet was gradually switched from regular food to pills. 1 pill a day is all I can have now. Apparently, if I tried bread, my stomach would see to it that I would never try again. I don't know how true this is. Sometimes I'd walk into the bakery to sniff fresh loaves, and Jem would let me stay there under the cover of huge shelves for as long as I liked. When I visit her, she tends to the food, and I pretend not to look at it. We were in the same training academy until a year ago. I was chosen, she was not. I was gold rank, she was silver, and now, according to the council, we can never speak to each other again. So we speak voicelessly, through fingers, through notes, hands on hands. I suppose they worried the chosen would reveal the mission, the truth. But I would not. The people must be kept ignorant. This is the oath of the chosen. It's my oath. I remember memorizing it. The captain made all of the chosen read it together in one of the training rooms. We stood next to each other in a room without windows. A fat bulb attached to the ceiling by a thin wire shone above us like a sick sun. It was much too small for all 10 of us. Our shoulders touched. We read the oath on a large screen at the back of the room. As we read, we discovered that the law everyone believed was true. The hierarchy of each person into ranks, bronze, silver, and gold, was a lie. With the 5th line of the oath, the Alpha Centauri people are all of the gold. Our world fell for each of us. 10 bodies, each unsure what to do with their hands. As I read it, my body tried to shrink. It wanted to eat itself whole. I didn't know anything. I'd never known a thing. We had been taught that our world had risen from mud and grit to form a civilization where each had their place according to rank. We knew about our roles from an early age. Some would be golden and chosen, others silver and food makers. The lucky were bronze, the select few, council members. To learn that our society was built on nothing, mere inventions from the minds of men, sucked the marrow out of me. We had marked out the sharp boundaries of our existence for nothing. I felt the atmosphere of the room empty as I looked up. The captain spoke the oath to break our collective gasp. We, the chosen, swear on our purpose of stability, harmony, truth. We are one, each a willing cog, shifting matter into its rightful place. The Alpha Centauri people are all of the gold. We, the chosen gold, swear to return the universe to order and keep it. We, the chosen gold, swear to return the universe to harmony and keep it. Silence. Inhaling felt akin to a shout. I tried to breathe shallow. I imagined myself as a corpse. Still, hard, empty. I whispered the oath to myself. Talking out loud always helped me memorize things. Return the universe to order, I said. Sen, if you have something to say, please do speak up, said the captain. The captain's large eyebrows distracted me from his scowl. I didn't say anything. Yes, he said. I hate him and his stupid eyebrows. Okay, fine, okay. Ordering the universe. What does that mean? I know we're trained to do the jump. I know we'll visit other worlds and collect resources, but order Ordering? It sounds weird, I guess. Weird, you guess. Those eyebrows again. Yes, sir. Well, most of your training has been physical so far. It has prepared your body to survive the jump. That stage, the longest stage, is over. You are now all well equipped to do your duty, but only a few of you will be honoured with carrying it out. And Harmony, no one looked at me. Everyone but me and the captain had their eyes on the ground. Yes, as you know, our world is governed by the Mellotron rules. Each is gold, silver, or bronze. Each works according to their rank. But the oath says we're all of the gold. It says the ranks are a lie. It started to pick my lip. Punishment for blasphemous chatter. Yes, but a noble one. The lie serves to educate, to prepare. What do you mean? Well, it's true that people fit into categories, but not everyone can accept the truth. Many would allow their ambition to rebel against peaceful order. This is why we seek out the chosen, those who can handle what is required. It is true that people can be gold, silver, or bronze, but it is not us, the people of Alpha Centauri, who are other than the gold. It is the people of the Orion Cygnus arm. The Earth people, yes. But what are we to do? Process them, order them, give them freedom from chaos. You mean evade them? No, I mean help them. The jump begins tomorrow. And that is end of part 1. And
Hey.
The second part is called Invasion, so you can probably guess how it's going to go. Yeah.
Thank you, that was fantastic. Beautifully read.
Yay!
Thank you so much for coming. And yeah, that is We the Gold from the what's the collection called?
It's called Possible Worlds and Other Stories.
By Rachel Handley. Coming 2022. What year is it? It's 2021 this year, right?
Yes, it's 2022.
Coming
Like
2022
June
from Ellipsis.
2022 is like the rough date. But yeah, that all depends on how life goes.
Of course. So, thank you very much, Rachel. If I go back to that means it's my turn. How's that for exciting? So I need that one, and that is hopefully displaying correctly. That looks right. So, Heaven Can Wait by R.J. Davenel, Book 1 of the Non-Agency. Chapter 1, Meet Your Maker. In the small hours of the morning after my death, I awoke on a sandbar in the cold delta, with a man who wasn't there waiting for me. He wore a tailcoat of some very fine wool, his silver cufflinks glowing in the moonlight. Everything about him was polished to a shine, from his shoes to his hair, and the simple black ascot around his throat. I couldn't tell you whether he was smiling, but looking at his face gave me a sense of comfort. It's not so much that men who aren't there don't have faces, but the light never seems to fall on them right. You never get a clear look, and so you never remember what they look like. Of course, while I was taking all this in, another part of my mind, in a voice of rising, uncomfortable urgency, was telling me that I was lying belly down on a sandbar, soaking wet, cold and very confused. My fingers brushed against my thin coin pouch before I knew what I was doing. Still another part of my mind was wondering why the shiny shoes in front of me weren't sinking, as my chin was, into the sticky silt of the sandbar. I spat sand and started to push myself up. The man who wasn't there leaned down and offered me a hand. I took it, gratefully, and was surprised by the strength in the wiry fingers. Standing, I did my best to brush the mud off my clothes, which mostly ended up spreading it onto my hands. Compared to his crisp dress, I was a sorry sight in a shirt that was little better than rags, rough trousers and ancient boots that I could already feel leaking mud. "Well, aren't we a live one?" said the man who wasn't there. "Huh? What do you mean?" I asked, then remembered my priorities. "Where am I?" "That's an interesting question. If you're asking about this place, we're about half a mile downstream from the Seaward Gate, in the Delta. Where you are? Well, that's more complicated. I looked around, puzzled. In the distance, 2 grey fingers stretched for the sky, yellow sandstone bleached by moonlight. No gate had ever spanned the half-mile width of the river between the towers, but the name remained. In the other direction, a handful of sails made faint white triangles out in the Coal Sound. What do you mean? Who are you? Cold unease sloshed in my empty stomach, hungrier and nastier than the river water chill of my drenched clothing. Me? Oh, I'm not here. But you've got more important things to worry about. His face was a cipher, utterly concealed by moonlight and magic. His voice, cutting through the night's quiet, could have come from a statue. I'm sorry to be so blunt about this, but you're dead. Dead? I assumed he was lying to me, but why? Quite so. I wouldn't be here otherwise. I'm not dead. I waved my hand at him. Look, moving around. Well, that's rather the problem. You may be moving around, but your body... He looked down. Obvious surprise dropped his voice to a whisper. Oh, damn. No body at all? This is going to be tough. What do you mean? What are you talking about? Moonlight laid the faintest hint of a shadow on dark ground to show the imprint of my body in the mud. Reassurance that there was no corpse at my feet failed to quell my surge of suspicion. I measured the distance to the bank. Too far to try. Well, normally when we get a... No, wait, let me start again. He took a deep breath, no mistaking that sound, and fiddled with one of his cuffs. You're a ghost. A particularly lively one, it has to be said, but a ghost. Your belief that you didn't die last night is what's keeping you going right now. It's my job to look after you until you're ready to let go of that belief and move on to the next life. That's why I'm not here, to remind you that you aren't either. Normally, the first thing I'd do, horrible as it sounds, would be to show you your body. Unfortunately, yours seems to have washed out to sea, so that's out. I'm a ghost? I pressed a hand to my chest, and was immensely relieved when it didn't go through. Thinking ghosts aren't solid? He paused, and once again I got the sense he might be smiling. If only it were that simple. If you believe hard enough that you didn't die, you can be completely indistinguishable from a living person. Why should I believe you? He shrugged. That I can't help you with right now. Can I at least persuade you to come with me? If nothing else, I can get you back to the city without you having to swim. I looked around again, nervously fingering my pouch. With the moon so near full, I could see just how much of the broad delta lay between me and the river gate. The treacherous mud of the north bank was nearer, but would take just as long to cross, if I didn't get sucked under completely. I nodded. He reached inside his coat and rummaged in a hidden pocket. After a moment, he pulled out a black rod a handspan long. Moonlight glinted white from a surface like polished marble. I'm afraid there are a few rules you'll have to obey while you're in my charge. His aristocratic voice turned prissy and nasal as he listed. Firstly, you'll make no attempt to have any contact with anyone you knew while alive. Anyone you knew before tonight, anyway. You will not talk to anyone other than me and my colleagues without our express permission. Under no circumstances will you tell anyone about myself, my colleagues, or the non-agency. You will not go into the city unescorted without our permission. We have a range of punitive measures available with which to enforce these rules. I might not have understood half the posh words he used, but I got the gist. I didn't want to know what a punitive measure was. He was obviously rich, most likely a lackey for someone even richer, and if he wanted to throw threats around to get me to go along, I wasn't going to stick my neck out to resist. At least with some noble scheme, there was a chance of a reward at the end of it. I said, if you want me something, why bother with the runaround? Why all this stuff about ghosts? What on earth do you mean? Bolder, I said. Well, you could have just gone with threats, rather than trying to wind me up about being a ghost. But you are a ghost. The high, girlish edge to his voice sounded like genuine puzzlement. Why else would I be here? Oh, come on, you want me some plot? You got me. I'd rather you were straight with me than all this dancing around. I cringed as a coil of fright shivered through my vitals. Had I gone too far? I am being straight with you, he snapped. You're a ghost. I'm here to see you through to judgment. There's no plot. What do you take me for? Chastened more by my own nagging worry than his anger, I didn't answer. The only thing worse than crossing a rich man is crossing a mad rich man. Well, I still don't think I believe you, I said, frowning. Look, just come with me. I'm sure you'll come round in time. His tone was bland, not sly or mocking, but the implied threat turned my guts to ice. Unreadable, his voice a bored drone, he finished. Oh, by the way, your name's now Pondin. My name is Tom. Fear might make me cooperative, but why did my name matter? Sorry, I'm not allowed to let you use your life name, either with me or with anyone else you run into. My manager is very strict about that. Your name is part of what's holding you to this world. You need to let it go. Pondin it is. That's a stupid name. I gave rein to pride and stepped forward, but the squelch of my own boot spoiled the effect of my anger. Indeed, you'll be less likely to get attached to it this way. Ghosts who hate their names never hang around as long as those who get attached. Forget about Tom. Move on. He didn't even look at me, as far as I could tell. At that point, I hadn't got out of the habit of trying to get a clear view of his face. He gave his rod a decisive twist, and, with a sharp pop, we were in the hostel. The thing that struck me first was how stale the air seemed. Dusty, dry, and tasteless. The lack of smell meant we had to be in Uptown Colin. The walls were wood-panelled, but the panelling was cracked and battered. There was no carpet, just unvarnished floorboards and a lot of cobwebs. Where are we? Renewed wariness robbed me of the warmth of my anger, and I shivered. You kids these days. You couldn't even manage to be surprised by the jump? The man who wasn't there, who wasn't stood behind me, sounded petulant. I spun round to face him, nettled, but he was already turning for the door, tucking his toy away. Everyone knows you rich folk carry all sorts of tricks these days. What's that one called? A teleporter. And as it happens, nobody has one unless they work for us. He raised his chin slightly. You have to have special permission from on high before the power will work for you. Which is a tremendous hassle, I should add, but worth it. On high? You know, our Radiant Lord, the Sun on high. God. It sounded reasonable enough. I knew next to nothing about God and his works. The temples were places you went to throw money away, not find it. And even God wouldn't help you if you stole from a priest. Come on, said the man who wasn't there, not stepping past me. Follow me. I followed him out through the door, into a hallway where cold air sucked at my still wet clothes. A staircase ascended into darkness on one side. Opposite me, an open doorframe led into some sort of tea room, judging by the layout of the tables and chairs within. The man who wasn't there led me into it. There was a counter in the corner, but no one to staff it. Where are we? I asked again. One of our hostels. It looks like you'll be with us for a while, so you'd better have somewhere to stay. Being around other ghosts can help you let go. I nodded. The woodwork was so age-ravaged it almost felt like the building itself was a ghost. What? No protest about how you have perfectly good lodgings of your own? I don't have any lodgings at all. Oh. Sorry. We sat at a table near the door. The chairs were bare, hard wood, but well polished and carved in the flowing shapes of waves, or possibly leaves. The man who wasn't there rested his arms on the table and cleared his throat. Now, Pondin, he said, whether or not you believe me, you're dead, and it's my job to persuade you of it. Can you remember anything about last night? I was trying to find some errands to run for gents in the taverns down by the docks. I thought back. The evening was a bit fuzzy. I think I ran into Mick and Percy at one point. Oh, yeah, they were going to try and sneak into Mr. Everett's place. I can't really remember. I might have gone with them. Oh, fantastic. There was no mistaking the sarcasm in the man who wasn't there's voice. You can't even remember how you died. I'm guessing you got a bang on the head, fell in the river, and drowned before you could regain consciousness. Now, if we could find your body, I could show you the bruise, and we'd be sorted. But no, you had to go and lose that too. Hey, I didn't choose this. I might give that some credit if you could remember what you did choose. He sat back and folded his arms. Look, Pondin, is it at least possible you got killed sneaking into this house? Sure, Mr. Everett has armed guards. And are you likely to have gotten caught? If I went with them, I'd give us a 3-to-1 chance of getting away with it. The tabletop was covered in rings from decades of tankards and glasses. I worried a splinter loose from the lip of a long crack in the surface and snapped it. So there's a good chance you died last night? I don't feel dead. Well, of course not, he snapped. That's the problem. Look, talking isn't getting us anywhere. I'm sure you'll feel more inclined to believe me once you've had your citation ceremony. Cite a what? A ceremony meant that whatever the man who wasn't there's masters wanted had to have some sort of clerical backing, but that failed to reassure. If I was being tangled in a plot involving the temples, the plotters and their enemies would be that much more powerful, and the possible rewards probably rather smaller. Every new client goes through it. It defines your gears and helps us work out how to help you. It's quite complicated, but I think some exposure to radiant insight might help shake your self-confidence. That's a good thing? Well, it's self-confidence that's keeping you here. You could be in heaven right now, you know. I only have your word for that. At the mercy of unknown forces, I felt anything but confident. Well, yes. But nevertheless, I'd like you to try the ceremony. I think you're still too sure that all this has nothing to do with you. And the ceremony will change my mind? My pulse started to pick up speed, my chest tightening. Certainly. No one communicates directly with the sun on high without coming away changed. Shocked cold in a way that had nothing to do with being fresh out of the river, I pushed back, leaning my uncomfortable seat up on its hind legs. Weakly, I said, Directly? Why are you so fearful? The calm, level patience of his voice took on an edge of suspicion. Do you doubt the mercy of our Radiant Lord? Fear kept me from a snapped, mocking retort about the man who wasn't there's sanity. The shadows lying uneasily across his face became sinister as I squinted, trying to make out a glimpse of human emotion there. Beneath me, the chair groaned. What do you say to a man who's just claimed a high initiate's holy prerogative? Equilibrium escaped me, and the best I could manage was a mumble. Will I be able to ask him whether I'm really dead or not? It doesn't work quite like that. You won't be talking, really. It's a much more direct form of communication. Well, what does that mean? I pressed my hands flat on the table, but their trembling just climbed into my arms. Reluctantly, I let my chair back down onto 4 legs, wood wrapped sharply on wood. Try it and see. He said it like he was talking about a new beer. Come on, follow me. Somehow, I found my feet, blood roaring in my ears, and let him lead me out to the stairs. Another suited man who wasn't there was coming down as we approached. I endured a long study under the regard of his not-quite eyes, queasy as I tried to make out his face in the gloom. Morning, Will. Who's the new fellow? He asked, his voice redolent with old, powerful money. New client, snapped my man who wasn't there, whose name, I guessed, was Will. Oh, Angel's Vengeance, sorry, said the other, and I caught a glimpse of the corners of his mouth, turned down in mock horror. I thought he seemed too lively to be a client, and with you-know-who retiring. That doesn't justify carelessness. Don't make this job any harder than it already is. Sorry. The other man who wasn't there spoke with a lazy drawl, and I got the feeling he wasn't taking Will too seriously. He turned to me. Welcome to the non-agency. No offence meant, but I hope you don't stay long. Whether because I shared his sentiment, or because of the humour in his voice, I found myself smiling. He walked past us, then stopped and turned. Congratulations on landing such a plum assignment, he said to Will. You know if you get this one right, that promotion has your name on it. Are you insinuating something? The other man who wasn't there laughed. I know I say this all the time, but you really should relax a bit. Anyone would think you were paranoid. He turned and walked into the tea room. Will set off upstairs into darkness. I followed, hand trembling on the banister. Under my fingers, the wood was smooth with ancient wear, except for cracks in the varnish. Will was a barely seen shape, cut out of the darkness by faint light from a landing high above. I followed him into a room hung with grey drapes which had once been white. 2 of them were moth-eaten. There was some sort of painting on the floor, a symbol I'd seen on some of the fancier uptown temples, surrounded by detailed renderings of angels. Candlesticks marked the corners of the design, but the room was lit by an oil lamp set into a small altar on the far wall. His voice deeper than usual, Will said, "Do you carry any guilt in your soul?" There was an odd echo in the room. I frowned at him and, not trusting myself to speak, gave him the slightest shake of my head. No point admitting to anything unless I had to. "Kneel in the circle, please." I did as instructed, assuming he meant the centre of the floor painting. The floorboards were hard beneath my knees. Will walked round me, lighting the candles and muttering something underneath his breath. If he was mad, it was a coolly rational madness that promised only ill. "You may wish to spend a moment contemplating your life," he said. He was definitely putting on a show of being priestly. His voice was lower still, and he moved with less of the nervous energy I was becoming used to. Unsure of what to do, I bowed my head and closed my eyes. Play along, then bolt at the first opportunity. An image surfaced suddenly of a night the year before when a drunken noble had given me a whole sovereign to run a message for him. That much gold had bought an entire taproom's worth of beer for the rest of the evening. By the end of the night, even the barmaids had been dancing on the tables. A spicy scent filtered through the ever-present dust as Will sprinkled something into the flames of each candle. He walked up to the altar, touched it, and murmured something before kneeling there. My knees ached in sympathy. For a moment, everything was perfectly silent, in the room and in my head. Enfolded in emptiness, my awareness came down to a single tickle at the back of my neck. Well, that and sore knees. "O Lord Radiant," Will began, "I invoke the right of citation. By your trust, the non-agency has charge of a wandered spirit. Before you, O Lord, is Pondin, who seeks a geas for his release. Let the supplication commence." I realised this was probably what intoning sounded like. The hairs rose on my forearms, and I had the sensation of something spiky and hard stroking down my spine. At the same time, the room seemed to grow light. It had not been dark, but now every dusty, tarnished fitting had a faint silver glow to it. The air whispered in answer, jarring a flicker from the candles. With a noisy, ugly swallow, Will reached up and extinguished the oil lamp on the altar. I shivered. My skin felt like it was crawling with insects. My shoulders cramped rigid with tension. I had an instant of dizziness and almost fell sideways. A hand on the floor steadied me but left my fingers tingling. The crawling sensation started to pass. Will swallowed again, and I thought I felt the floorboards move in sympathy with the sound. My knee twinged, and I shifted my weight. "O Lord, I speak for Pondin. Grant us the blessing of your insight, so that Pondin may be free to go before your judgment and pass the gates of heaven." From the flickering of the candles and the movement of the silver dust, the wind in the room was rising, but I couldn't feel it. The candles went out, and as the light faded, I felt calm descend through my brain. My eyelids drooped. My head felt clear and cool, but my skin was warm with the touch of summer sun. My mind wandered. I remembered the gold of last night's twilight behind the palace as Mick led the way across Longbridge. We walked into the alley between the wall of Mr. Everett's garden and his neighbours. Mick scrambled up first, then we helped Percy get up. I climbed last. Just for a moment, I was able to open my eyes, but the room was completely dark. We crossed the garden carefully, watching the windows and the back door of the house. Mick and I had argued over whether the back door was likely to be unlocked, but he'd decided that this was where we'd get in. Inside, the house was surprisingly plain. Everything was panelled in dark wood. The metalwork was all polished brass. We made our way upstairs and ran straight into Mr. Everett's guard. In the instant before all sense of order was lost, I recognised the thick-set face, the dark and menacing scowl. Relived panic flooded over me, bringing with it images of desperate flight, getting lost in the mansion's endless lounges and drawing rooms. Worse than the panic were the glimpses of violence. Every time the guard appeared in my memory, other images assaulted me. The guard smashing someone's face in, throwing someone across a room, blood on hands, a cudgel falling to the ground. I rocked forward as I felt the blow which had knocked me out, but the images didn't stop. A woman lying across a bed, bruises on her wrists and face. A man limping. A woman stumbling out of a burning building. I remembered falling into the river, a tumbling, terrifying feeling. Like a bad dream, hitting the water slammed me back to awareness. I felt as if I'd been dropped straight down on my knees, they hurt so much. A single image lingered. My body, limbs flailing, as Everett's guard dropped me into the tide. From the angle, I guessed I was seeing as Mick had watched, from the parapet of Long Bridge. I gasped for breath in the darkness. Will lit the oil lamp. Everything seemed to be back to normal. The air was still. The dust no longer glistened. "Our Radiant Lord has spoken," Will said, but his voice no longer echoed. "Pondin, you may stand." I couldn't suppress a groan as I got to my feet, staggering as my knees clicked in protest. I still hadn't caught my breath. "Are you all right?" Will walked over to me, back to his usual twitchy self. He put a hand on my arm, and I let him. "What was that? Did I communicate?" "Quite definitely." "I don't remember any words." "Indeed, there are seldom words. The sun on high doesn't need them." He gave my arm a squeeze, and I pulled away from him with a shiver. "I saw my death, I think." "So you believe now?" I shivered again under the study of his half-shaded eyes and took a step back. "Well, I saw Mr. Everett's guard throw me into the river, and I think I felt him knock me out. But what just happened? I don't know how to take it." True enough, though I never for a second doubted I'd been touched by the sun on high. Whatever doubts I had about Will and his colleagues, there was no longer any question of their divine mandate. Trembling and gasping, I shouldered the icy certainty that I was in their charge for a reason. "Perhaps for now it would be best if you just relaxed. Take some time to calm down and see how you feel then. Your gears has been set, but there's no rush." And that is chapter 1. And I made it through without too many flubs or choking or anything. Thank you very much for listening. And I guess... any questions? Again, all the links for the book are on rj.card.co. You can use the Menti Q&A, clicking the link below, or go to menti.com, put in the code, or just ask in chat. And if nobody asks anything, then I'll wrap the stream up. No, it's not set in contemporary Britain. It is strongly influenced by Britishness, probably obviously from the accents I was doing for the men who weren't there. I have a rich collection of British accents, shall we say. At least one I didn't use at all, which will be reserved for another part of the story. Maybe I'll do a reading of the full thing at some point. Interesting. I would not have cited that as a direct influence, although I did. Obviously, I read the Narnia books as a child, as did basically every bookish child my age, I think. Yeah, I wouldn't have cited. I think maybe obviously the most direct influences are like Terry Pratchett and Douglas Adams. and the sort of what gets called a young adult fantasy boom that happened after Harry Potter, which my mother and sister bought basically every book going. Ah, right, I haven't read Perelandra. Thank you very much, Jake. Yeah, I mean, I can do big exposition chunks, but they aren't in the book. It's all supposed to kind of, as Sarah mentioned, like, Tom doesn't know very much about the world. And something that isn't evident from this section, but you'll see it very quickly if you read the book, he is narrating to a specific audience. In ways that are quite important for what he says and what he doesn't say. What inspired the bureaucratic afterlife stuff? I'm British, Leroy. It's so I mean, like there is this kind of joke, right, that all British art is fundamentally about class. And it's not true, but this is definitely a book about class. And the hostel, the decor in the hostel is fundamentally the decor of my British private secondary school that I went to. You could walk around that school and you could see exactly what the spatial influence was. And the thing that I'm interested in here is how kind of church and state are linked in these institutions. Obviously, the non-agency is not a school per se, but it's the same sort of problem. It is funny that you use the word bureaucracy, because if I scroll down just a second, the next chapter is literally called The Bureaucracy of Death. So no, Pondin is not a real name. All the ghosts are given names that are not. It was a real effort, and if you read the book, you'll encounter the other names as well. All the games are given, all the ghosts are given names that are ridiculous. It's supposed to be kind of ridiculous and make them uncomfortable with the names. I wrote this before I knew I was transgender, but there is an extraordinary echo looking back on it now of like questions of real names and dead names and what people prefer to be called, and the importance of having your own name and having like the right name. Yes, it is. It's not the only resonance of my latent transness that's in the book, but it's probably the most obvious one. Yes, religion, paperwork, being assigned names that you don't like. Yes, I think it does. It is actually, if you sit down, so coming up with names for fantasy stories is this famous trope about the genre, right? Particularly ever since Anne McCaffrey bequeathed us the Anne McCaffrey apostrophe, which I cut my fantasy reading teeth on Anne McCaffrey, but she does have a lot to answer for there. And there are lots of jokes about how ridiculous kind of fantasy names got in the 80s, particularly and into the 90s. But when you sit down to actually come up with names that sound like they are acts of mockery, then it was really, really difficult to get anything that sounded consistent or systematic in any way. Yeah. I think there's a handful of other ghosts in the novel, and some of the names work, some of them don't. But Pondin was fun. I think Pondin works. And when I actually write book 2, so the status of book 2 is I've written it twice already, and I'm not happy with either version of it, so I need to write it again. When I write book 2, I've got a whole bunch more ghosts to come up with names for, so that'll be a challenge. I mean, naming characters is always a pain. I have a special. Oh, you're a fan of naming characters, are you, Sarah? I'll ask you to name all my characters then. Yes, more Leroy writing is a good thing. Write more things. I found, years after writing this novel, I eventually found a formula that I like for generating fantasy-sounding names, but I haven't actually used it for anything yet. And yes, to go back to something that Sarah said in our backstage chat, it's a story about religion, really, essentially. Like if I had to pick themes, if I had to summarize the themes, it's a story about theodicy. And the reason for that is that at the time, so I had a very close friend that I was housemates with for years when I was a student, who was a big kind of movement atheist guy, like big Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens sort of person. And this was before it was obvious to those of us who are in like the cultural bubble from which that springs how racist and misogynistic and that movement was and was becoming. But we had I was never comfortable with it myself. Like I went through an atheist phase as a teenager and then kind of grew out of it. For basically 6 years, we were engaged in one continuous debate about how religion works and what its place is in human society and so on. And like whether it was ever okay to act for religious reasons, because of course this was, quite apart from anything else, this was the era of like the aftermath of 9/11 and the Westboro Baptist Church and some very high profile situations where like people were doing horrible things and claiming religious motivation. And so this ended up being a story where like God is unequivocally real. Everybody in this world agrees God is real. God is an active power in the world. Everybody's seen angels, maybe not regularly, but it's common enough that everybody's seen angels. And so there's no question about God's existence. Obviously, in the chapter I read, any final doubt that Tom might have had is taken away. And then he's watching the non-agents who claim to work for God, and he, has to come to some sort of judgments of his own about, like, why they're able to do that in the context of a world where God exists. Let's put it that way. Without wanting to spoil too much of what happens in the rest of the book, you can read the rest of the book. Tom is confronted with some fairly serious kind of moral questions about what the religion is telling him to do. And hope interesting things happen as a result. Hopefully they're interesting. Question from Menti. How did I first think up the idea of the story? Like so many good stories, I had a dream. I had a dream of 2 specific scenes in the novel. One of which is the very first part of Tom kind of waking up on this sandbar and meeting the man who wasn't there. And the other is a thing that happens in, I think it's the end of chapter 2, but it might be the start of chapter 3. There's just these 2 kind of flashes. Dream theory. It's hardly the only story that's come to me from a dream. Yeah, just these 2 images. I woke up from the waking up in the river was the second part of the dream. That was what I woke up from, and in my head was the line, "In the small hours of the morning after my death," which is just like, you get a line like that and you can't waste it. Which is why I've just put it everywhere in all the promotional material, because I'm really proud of it. But I had this dream, and part of the dream was like the basic concept of how being a ghost works. Like, the fantasy stories are so often kind of defined by or built out from a central idea about how magic works or how the supernatural system in the world works. And so I had this idea about like what a ghost is and how being a ghost works, and the whole thing just like unfolded from there. I kept thinking of new ways to use this system, and that the book is essentially a set of scenarios that get Tom to do something new with being a ghost, and things that he can do because he's a ghost that he couldn't do without that. And obviously, you know, in a world where there's a religion that has a salvation myth, this is something that's a little bit kind of... Once I thought of it, it was weird to me that it's not been more of a problem historically, although I think it probably has been a conceptual problem historically. Like, the idea of ghosts existing doesn't fit with, if you've got a you die and you go to judgment and you go to heaven myth, then ghosts don't fit in that picture. And so I was curious about playing out not just the kind of magical consequences of being a ghost, but the thematic consequences. And as this, you know, you start with a scene, and the scene gives you the seeds to get a story rolling, and the story expands into a novel, and then the novel eventually spills out from that into sequels, and that was excuse me, how the theme got started. When I finished the first draft of this book, I was so proud that I had written a standalone. Every idea I'd had for ages had been trilogies and sequences, and I was really getting into like epic fantasy as a genre at the time, so I was dreaming of like 10-book series and 20-book series, and is it Ericsson's got a series that's like 27 books long, and I was reading things like Robert Jordan, and so dreaming of writing these really long stories, and here was this super self-contained like 60,000 word story, and I was really proud. And then I woke up one morning a couple of months later with, oh wait, that's the sequel hook, and I was stuck with it. Yeah, eventually I've got to write the sequels. Book 3 is more or less written, because that one went well the first time I tried it. Book 2 is up on bricks. Anyway, I think my voice is starting to run out. As you can probably tell, I've had a hell of a week. But if there are no further questions, I don't see any further questions. I will say thank you so much, everyone, for coming, for chatting, for hanging out, for listening. As I said, the book is available now on Smashwords, all major ebook formats, some plain text. Kindle store on Sunday, physical copies soon. If you want to follow me on Twitter @EatThePen, I will shout from the rooftops, or you can keep checking rjdavnell.card.co. Thank you very much, Rachel, Sarah, for coming in and contributing. Big thanks to Tara for keeping an eye on chat. And I will bid you all a very good evening. Thank you so much for coming.